Hi, this is Carl Rust, and I've worked in schools for over 30 years. I've learned a lot about how people learn, and I wrote a book called Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn: How We Can Transform Schools and Reintroduce Natural Learning. Welcome to Get Out of the Way and Let Kids podcast, episode 37. And I don't have anybody that I'm interviewing today, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been up to the last couple of weeks, because I'm back at school subbing in different buildings, going here and there and all over the place. I also want to recap a little talk that I gave at the O conference this summer, in case you weren't able to be there. So let me start off by just talking about some things I talked about at Aero. And I think this is a really good time for us to get involved with public schools. I entitled the talk Taking Over, but I don't think it's necessarily a case of taking over. It's just a case of we have something that schools need, which is us, and they're going to be a little tolerant of different ways of looking at things because they're so needy. So why are conventional schools having trouble? So they're having trouble staffing. They can't fill all their teacher positions. They can't fill all their paraprofessional positions. And they have budget issues, which seems kind of at odds in a way, that they can't fill their staffs, but they have budget issues. Test scores are remaining flat or declining, and that's a real worry for them. Students are more disengaged than ever because of COVID, partly because they experienced what it was like to be at home and not be at the school building. And they had some little strategies that they were using to not be engaged with class, and that's continued on after getting back in person. And also, there's a lot of government scrutiny about different practices and different things they're doing. So people are on edge, but they need people. There's a teacher shortage. There's a substitute teacher shortage. Schools need you. So we can have an opportunity to be what we call subversive subs, where we go into a building and try to be as kid-friendly, as freedom-friendly, as saying yes as much as we can. You could also get a job at a school and be a responsible rebel, where you're kind of trying not to get too far out of the line, but you're also pushing some ideas, pushing the boundaries. You could be a volunteer at school if you're not really caring about the money and you have time, and you could volunteer at school. There's also some paths to get to be a teacher. And my journey wasn't traditional, which I think I've recounted way back in the beginning, but I didn't start off as a 20-year-old, 22-year-old as a teacher. I was a theater major. I was in the newspaper business. I was in the insurance business. I worked for my family company for a while, and then I decided to become a teacher. So I was older. But one of the things, if you've already got a bachelor's degree, in a lot of states, they have a transition to teaching program where you don't have to go back and get a full bachelor's degree. You can even start teaching right away and slowly get your credentials together. A lot of states have what they call emergency licenses. So you might check in with your local school district and see if there's any possibility that you could actually be a teacher in a classroom. So some people seem to think that conventional school is broken. We should just let it, fall apart, die, disintegrate. But the problem with big institutions, over time, they do tend to kind of go away, but it takes a while. It takes a long time. And in the meantime, we got millions of kids in jail. And some of them are in a nicer jail, some of them are in not nice jail. So they need us to come in and show them that they can navigate their own ship, even in dire circumstances. You can navigate your own ship. So what can you do if you go into a subbing position or as a transition to teaching, or you go in as a paraprofessional teacher's aide? What can you do? You can plant seeds of resistance. So I think it's interesting just to give kids some choices because they're not used to that. You can also ask them questions. What do you like about school? What's the best thing about this? What's the worst? And the next step is there something we can do about that? You don't like homework, let's say. Can we work on not getting homework? In some ways, it doesn't really matter if you're successful or not. It's planting the seed in people's mind that doesn't have to be this way. It can be different. So if there's something you don't like, you can see if you can change it. Ask the teacher if we can do this or that. And teacher can say no, principal can say no, the school board can say no, but you're still asking. You're getting yourself in the habit of asking for what you want. And one of the skills, I think, in the 21st century is just how do you present ideas to people that may not agree with you and get them to agree. I mean, isn't that what a salesman does? People come into a dealership, they don't really want that $50,000 car. They maybe want the $20,000 car, but how a good salesman figures out how to sell them. Spread awareness about alternatives. There are alternatives going on all over the place. They're not as common as I would like, but they're there. You can point out, hey, there's a school in Ann Arbor, Michigan that does things differently. There's a school in Sudbury Valley, Massachusetts that does things differently. Encourage dreams and imagination. And one way I do this is have kids plan their ideal school. What would school look like if you could plan it? If you could build a brand new school and organize it in any way, what would it look like? And oftentimes they get stuck on things like they want to have Pizza Hut in the cafeteria. That's all okay because it's the first steps towards what should school really look like. Allow kids to collaborate. So sometimes as a subversive sub, I will even ignore lesson plans. Sometimes the teacher will actually state in their lesson plans, kids have to work by themselves. They can't work with partners. I don't pay attention to that. I just go ahead and let them do partners because they will probably ask you that one. Can we work together? That's one of the most common questions you're going to get when you give an assignment as a substitute teacher or as a teacher. One of the most common questions is going to be, can we work together? Kids are naturally collaborative, so encourage that. Encourage talking and discussion. Sometimes the teacher will also put in their plans, no talking allowed. I think that's the silliest rule that schools ever come up with. That's definitely shooting yourself in the foot or, cutting off your nose to spite your face because kids talking to each other is how they're going to build their language. Vote on something. Just say, okay, we've got a choice between we can do math now or we can do reading now. How many people want to do math now? And again, it doesn't even matter what the answer is. What matters is kids are not used to voting. They think the teacher decides everything. Talk about community and citizenship. What does it mean to be a community? What does it mean to be a citizen? So a lot of times when I go in as a sub, I'll say, I'm a visitor. You guys are the citizens of this room. You know the routines. You know what's expected. I don't. So start a petition. Let them move around. It's another thing teachers say, do not let them out of their seat. Again, I mean, it depends on the group, depends on your comfort level, your person too. But a lot of times I will let them move around. Okay, my number one thing is teachers will write, kids cannot use the restroom except at breaks. I totally ignore that. I'm not cleaning up any puddles. I'm not cleaning up messes. kids, if they ask me to go to the restroom, I let them go. Usually, hopefully, there's a sign out sheet or a pass. But in any case, if a kid says, I need to use the restroom, to me, biology trumps everything. Um, so that's a little bit about what I do. One thing you kind of have to do before you go into these situations, though, is think about what do you really believe? What are your core beliefs? How thick is your skin? Are you going to be upset if the school, this has never happened to me, by the way, if the school asks you not to come back or they say they yell at you for something? Do you care if you get fired? I started out as a subversive sub. I didn't really care if they fired me, but again, it never happened. Um, so that's a little recap of the talk that I gave at Arrow. And one thing about what I'm noticing about being in schools again as a sub, I was going to call up my little record here to remind myself what schools I've been in. Um, but I've been noticing lately that there seems to be the school is thinking of what school is like in a certain way. If I remember how to do this. They've got a narrative that they're telling. And it seems to me like their narrative is usually something like adults make decisions, kids sit in their seat and do what they're told in an orderly and quiet fashion. So the problem with that narrative is it doesn't necessarily jibe with what's happening. Kids do not want to sit in their seats. They do not want to be quiet. In many cases, they do not want to do the tasks that are assigned them by the teacher. So I think that maybe we could come up with a better narrative, and maybe that would make people feel better because I think the current narrative makes teachers feel very miserable. They feel very bad and they feel very incompetent that they're not making kids sit in seats and be quiet well enough. It works to a degree. It's not working 100%. So they feel bad. They feel like they're a failure, like they've done something wrong. It also makes some of the kids feel like failures and incompetent because they can't do it. And they get yelled at and they get called out and they get teachers saying mean things to them. And maybe some of their friends are looking at them like they're crazy or something and they feel miserable. What if the narrative was something like, we're going to be a community of learners who care about each other, encourage each other, and work together? That may not be perfect, but you see, it's a little bit different. It's a different narrative. So what would that look like if we said we're a community? There might still be issues. I'm sure that there'd still be some kids, especially at first, that wouldn't fit into that mode. One thing I noticed as a sub that's very apparent is there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 young people, young learners in every classroom that don't belong there. They're in the wrong place. And there's, for various reasons, there may be more than that. Actually, the more I think about it, there may be half the class that doesn't belong there. And I'm going to play a little clip of a video I made at school on Monday. Today, by the way, is Tuesday, September 17th. I just made this little recording yesterday. So let me play that little recording and then I'll come back and make some more comments. So here I'm back at school again. I've been doing a few subbing assignments here and there. I did an art class all day last week. Today I'm all day special ed, which means I'm in and out a lot of different classrooms, working with different age kids, which is kind of fun to do. And it's interesting to go into a lot of different classrooms. You see good things happening. You see things that maybe aren't so great. But I would recommend it to almost everybody if you get a chance to substitute teach, especially if you get to do like where you get to visit different classrooms. It's really an eye-opening experience, I think, to be in a lot of different classrooms. So again, you see, depending on different classrooms, different levels, you see kids of all abilities. So I was in a kindergarten class where kids were writing their names. They were writing numbers. The teacher would say, let me see 5, and they could do 5 counting bears on a 10 grid, for 10 frame they call it. And others that were kind of fuzzy. It's always difficult to pace the class in the right way, because you have some that as soon as you say the number 5, they put 5 bears on their 10 frame. Others take a long time to figure it out, and you have to help them. I was in I think it was a 3rd grade classroom where they were writing some words. One of the words was some, S-O-M-E, and the teacher gave an example using the word some in a sentence. But I noticed a lot of the kids had written S-U-M, which is phonetically correct, but not the word, because they hear some, S-U-M, and they haven't learned the exceptions yet. Other kids knew S-O-M-E. They just wrote it down right away. Some kids had a hard time forming their letters. So to pace that class is difficult because some have it instantly, some have kind of an incorrect version, phonetically correct, but context incorrect. Some great things I saw was in kindergarten and in 3rd grade, some brain breaks, some movement. But again, the element that they're lacking here is the element of the child making decisions about, okay, I've got time to do something I want to do. What do I want to do? So they put a thing up on the screen, a dance, exercising or whatever, and it's not the kids get punished if they're not doing exactly what's on the screen, but that's kind of the expectation that you have set an activity for kids to do. It's a fun thing. The kids enjoy it. They like moving. They like the music. They like dancing. They like to be silly. But the element that's kind of missing is the free choice, the free play element. It's interesting because I'm in a special ed room and the teacher just had to move rooms. She's got lots of supplies in boxes. And I see this all the time in buildings where teachers have stored manipulatives. They have number blocks which connect to each other. You have counting. You have all kinds of different blocks that you can build with, but they're used for counting. But they're in tubs. And I wonder what would happen if kids had access to some of this and just to play with. See what they would come up with if you could have a tub of blocks or just have them out where kids could explore. It would be interesting to see what kind of things they would come up with. In a 6th grade classroom, they were doing some reading where it's really ironic that they're reading the UN Declaration of Children's Rights and taking a paragraph and trying to explain what rights it gives children and was it clear or confusing and why. But presented in a way that I'm not sure it would make a difference how you presented it. The kids weren't really interested in it. It wasn't something that they were really buying into. So when you have something like this, your teacher pleaser students will try to finish the assignment the best that they can. The kids that are kind of like in the middle somewhere will fiddle around with it a little bit and they will put down some stuff, but they won't put a lot of thought in it. And then you have the resistors who don't want to do it at all, and they won't do it. They just won't write anything down, or they'll write something a little bit down just to, they think the teacher's watching. But I didn't see any level of engagement where kids really cared about this, where you would think children's rights might be something they would be interested in. But to them, it's just another reading, something out of the reading book that they don't see where it has any impact on them personally at all. I've got another special ed assignment on Friday. I might do another one of these brief little videos about what happens there. I've got some groups coming in a little bit, so maybe I'll do a part 2. So there I reflect a little bit about things you see all the time if you're in school, is just discrepancies between pacing, class makeup. It makes you wonder what would happen if kids had a choice about where they were. Of course, a lot of kids would not choose to be in the classroom at all, but something to think about. So there are a couple more things I wanted to talk about. And I mentioned those groups, and the groups were really fun in a way, although one group of boys, we were playing a game, which should be fun, but they were a little bit, had a lot of energy, and they were kind of goofing around, throwing the dice on the floor and stuff. And it was okay because, I understand that the kids need some of that relief from, being tied down to a desk. I had 2 different groups of kindergartners, and I'm apprehensive about working with kindergartners because it wasn't something I did a lot in my career, but they can be a lot of fun, especially a small group. We did some letters first, was reading. So we're doing letters, and we did beginning sounds, and they were really into it. Talking about engagement, it really was, they were pretty engaged for the most part. A real contrast to the 6th grade group. I mean, they were interested, they were having fun. It was fun to them. I show them a letter and they would say the sound, and then later on we did some pictures and we pasted the picture under the beginning sounds. It was cool. One thing I had to kind of use my judgment on is because they had a couple, I wasn't sure what letter sounds they had learned. And it's a little tricky because I wasn't sure if they'd done the long sounds yet. And so one of the pictures was an ice cream cone. And so we could have put it under I, but they kept saying I, itch, I. So I thought, they may not know that there's a long I. So I said, well, what is this ice cream in? And it was in a little cone. So we decided to put it under C for cone. So, and then there was an owl, and I thought, boy, that's really going to be a little confusing for O sound to do an owl. Where do you put an owl on an O sound? Because their O was O, octopus, ah. So some things. Then we had a different group with a couple kids were in a couple of the same kids in both groups. So we did math, we were doing numbers. I'd hold up a number, they'd tell me the number, and then they'd show me how many fingers. I guess fingers are back in, by the way. I remember a time when we were train kids not to use their fingers. It always seems silly to me because your fingers, they're there all the time. You can use them. And then they were coloring in different numbers, and but the kids were really kind of into it. It was kind of fun. I was at a different school on Friday, and there was one classroom that really kind of bothered me. The teacher was very much up and down. So that was like praising the kids, you're doing such a wonderful job. And then it seemed like the next minute they were doing a horrible job. Then they're doing a wonderful job. Then they're doing a horrible job. And I was thinking, that was first grade. And as a little kid in that class, I might get really confused about, or maybe I just start tuning him out. I'm not sure what would happen. And this one poor little girl, she was a little active. She was one of the ones I was supposed to be working with. She would, kind of disregard verbal instructions and just kind of do stuff. But the teacher wasn't always very clear about what the expectations were. So one expectation was, we're going to clean up our areas, clean up the floor. And so she had just like 30 seconds before told this little girl, let's call her Susie, told Susie, you have to sit in your chair, put your head down because you're being so disruptive. But then she's telling the rest of the class we're cleaning up. So Susie starts cleaning up. She's going crawling around the floor cleaning up. And other kids are doing the same thing. But Susie, I didn't really happen this time, but I was really apprehensive that Susie was going to get in big trouble because she was doing something. The teacher had specifically told her, sit in your seat, put your head down. But do we realize what we're asking for some kids when they're 6 years old? Some of them cannot do that for very long, if at all. 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, their brain has gone to something else. So I was talking before about kids that don't belong in a certain room. I don't think she belonged in that room. And that teacher needed some help, it's partly the narrative that we're telling ourselves. In first grade, kids are going to sit in their seat and quietly do their work. Maybe not. But if that's the teacher narrative and they feel like if I don't do this, I'm a failure, then I can kind of see there's some pressure. And one thing you have to be really careful about as an adult in school is not to target a particular kid because you're expecting them to do something. You're looking for them to do something. And at any minute, they're going to do something naughty. You just know it. So you're like on them like a hawk. And meanwhile, over here, there's somebody else, little Johnny's over here doing exactly the same thing. But my focus is on Susie. What are you doing? And Johnny's just convorting around, but Susie is out of her seat. So Susie gets targeted. And verbally shaming, which is really something I think we should try to teach teachers how to move beyond that shaming. Dr. Ross Green, who I really like a lot of his writing, has a phrase, and I think it goes, kids will do better when they know better. And some kids are not able to do what you're asking them to do. So maybe we need to change the narrative. Okay, little side note, a lot of buildings I'm in have these beautiful courtyards with trees, grass, benches, maybe even a little sunken area where you could do a play or something. Nobody ever goes out there. I have yet to be in a building in the last 3 or 4 years, well, even when I was at my building that I was at for 25 years, people do not use those courtyards. And it's like, why are you using the courtyard? It's a beautiful little space. It's enclosed. Even if you don't want to take kids outside because they might run off in different directions, which doesn't usually happen anyway, but this is enclosed by the building in a beautiful natural green space. So I would really like to say to some principals, why aren't you using your courtyard? It's a beautiful space. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. I will come back with another interview, or maybe I'll come back and just talk about what's happening at school. So thanks for listening. And where's my little thing I usually leave? Let's see. I think I lost it. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified when we drop down a new episode. I guess it's really wonderful if you leave a review. that helps more people find out that we're out here. I am putting some of the videos up on YouTube to try to get a little more exposure. So share, like, subscribe, heart, all those good things wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, get out of the way and let kids learn. This has been Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe, follow, share, and leave a comment.